United States President Donald Trump declares war on the newly elected New York City mayor, Democrat and Muslim Zakaran Mamdani. The point is that, as Politico reports today, a wide range of prominent New York public figures have been meeting behind the scenes for several weeks to discuss the possibility of Donald Trump sending the National Guard or other federal troops to New York to effectively seize power in the largest United States city after the Republicans' defeat in the election. Moreover, in New York, the current authorities have already created a military cabinet, where meetings are held with representatives of law enforcement, business, activist groups, and war veterans to prepare for possible intervention by federal authorities. At the same time, Mamdani himself got into a scandal, the father of the elected mayor of New York, Mahmood Mamdani. People recall his book, written back in 2004, where he describes two groups of Muslims. As he himself said, he refers to good Muslims and bad Muslims, and claims that it was the United States of America that created and fostered the bad Muslims. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave any detailed comment under this video. Subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News. The link is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation or a paid sponsorship subscription using the details and links provided. In the description of this video it says, support the Pechiy channel. Choose any format that is convenient for you. I will be grateful for any support you give. So, Politico reports that Donald Trump, after the victory of the Democrat Zakaran Mamdani in the New York mayoral election, plans to bring the National Guard into the city, and even the United States Army, under the pretext of fighting illegal immigrants or crime, as he has done more than once in other cities. Local authorities fear that in this way, Trump simply wants to seize power in the city after the Republicans lost the New York mayoral election. According to Politico, a wide circle of influential people in New York and New York State Governor Kathy Hochul have developed a virtual war room for discussions with law enforcement representatives, officials, business people, and colleagues, major activists. In this way, they want to stop or at least mitigate any federal intervention in New York. Interestingly, separately, the state authorities are preparing a meeting with the clergy and veterans organizations of New York, and now the governor's team has stated, quote, "The goal is to prevent a federal intervention, and if it doesn't work out, then hopefully we'll be able to delay it, and if something happens, we'll have to deal with it. Each scenario is based on careful consideration." Reportedly, the scale of planning and coalition building is intended to leave Trump with no excuse whatsoever to send the National Guard or active duty troops into the city. After all, New York's leadership had spent months watching Trump deploy the National Guard, immigration and customs enforcement agents, and military personnel to other cities, and they were preparing for similar actions in the president's hometown. By the way, New York State Governor Hochul has a temporary relationship with Donald Trump, who shows great interest in New York. However, she has openly expressed concern that the president is using the election of Zakaran Mamdani as a pretext for effectively federalizing the city. Well, in fact, he will bring in the National Guard, the military, and essentially seize power. As Politico writes, the governor invited a wide range of activists and labor union organizations to her Manhattan office. At the meeting, she called on them to cooperate constructively with each other and with the New York authorities. This was to avoid violence and vandalism that could prompt Trump to deploy federal troops, as he did this summer in Los Angeles. Hochul assured the groups that any protests they organized would be protected by state and city law enforcement agencies. But she added that they would have to try to maintain control and not allow people to provoke the police and actually clear the way for Trump's intervention. In addition, Governor Hochul and her allies understand that now, after the election of Zakaran Mamdani, they will have to act even more aggressively on the public relations front. That is why, already in November, New York decided to conduct such demonstrative raids against crime with the help of local veterans and clergy. In addition, it is veterans who will be used in public relations campaigns and advertisements where they want to show that those who have served understand how wrong and unconstitutional it is to use troops against United States citizens. And here I will quote from Politico. President Donald Trump threatened to cut federal funding allocated to Mamdani in New York, but so far he has refrained from aggressively deploying immigration and customs enforcement, which he did deploy in Chicago. However, city and state officials were shocked by an immigration police raid on Canal Street in Manhattan last month, during which migrants who had long been selling their goods on the busy downtown street were detained. It was a test of how the city, its leadership, law enforcement, and citizens would respond. And it was probably just the first test. But the problem is that Zakran Mamdani himself has already been involved in a scandal, even though he will officially become mayor only on January 1, 2026. Today, opponents of the Democrat Mamdani brought up his father, Mahmood Mamdani, and his book published in 2004. The book has an eloquent title, Good Muslim, Bad Muslim, America, the Cold War, and the Roots of Terror. In this book, the father of the future mayor of New York argues that, quote, good Muslims are secular, moderate, or pro-Western Muslims who prove their loyalty by condemning bad Muslims, supporting United States wars, such as the War on Terror, and embracing American values. They are considered loyal and not suspicious, but only if they actively oppose bad Muslims and confirm their unpredictability. But the definition of bad Muslims caused outrage among Americans because the father of the future mayor of New York insists that bad Muslims were created by the United States itself, and that, in general, terrorism by Muslims is actually the work of Americans. Before that, they were not like this. Next is a long quote from Mahmood Mamdani's book. I emphasize, this is a quote. Mamdani refers to people linked to political Islam, terrorism, or anti-Western dissent. They are portrayed as inherently violent, fanatical, or pre-modern, embodying a cultural value that explains actions like September 11th. Examples include Al-Qaeda militants or Islamists, who are seen as a product of Islamic terrorism rather than as geopolitical consequences, such as the United States backed Afghan Mujahideen during the Soviet invasion. Examples include Al-Qaeda militants or Islamists who are seen as a product of Islamist terrorism, not as geopolitical consequences, such as the United States backed Afghan Mujahideen. During the Soviet invasion, the United States spent billions arming and training Afghan fighters against the Soviet Union, portraying them as freedom fighters. And here comes the most striking quote from Mahmood Mamdani's book, Radical Islam was born during the Cold War. It grew up in Washington and Islamabad, not in Mecca and Medina. In the 1980s, the term jihad was a positive term. The term mujahideen was a positive term. Ronald Reagan invited Afghan mujahideen to the White House. There's a famous photo where Ronald Reagan calls Afghan mujahideen the equivalent of America's freedom fighters, the founding fathers. In the 1980s, the terms jihad and mujahid were praised by the CIA and America. In the 1980s, the State Department sent $3 billion to the Afghan group, the very group that eventually became Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. The United States decided to fight communism using the teachings of the Quran. They used the Quran for propaganda and religious purposes, believing that it would help in the fight against communism. We created Frankenstein, and when he turned against us, we called him a monster. End of quote. So, I think there's definitely something to think about here. I'll put an ellipsis here. Share your opinion and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Bye everyone. Goodbye.